All right, so Vaush fans, welcome to my channel. You're probably here after the Charlie Kirk Vaush debate, hosted, moderated by Tim Pool. And here are my thoughts about it. But you should subscribe to my channel. I do progressive content. I'm from rural America. I try to give an offline perspective of online topics. Yeah, subscribe please. But anyway, Vaush did a really good job making connections. So in real life, in politics, in anything, connections matter. So Vosh being really friendly and cordial with Tim Pool gave him the opportunity to do this. A high profile debate, his most high profile debate against Charlie Kirk, a man who was going to work within the Trump admin when Trump proposed the 1776 project, patriotic education. So this is a pretty big deal that Vaush, a small socialist, whatever, libertarian socialist YouTube creator, it's a big deal that he was able to do this against Charlie Kirk. To start off on the vaccine conversation, talking about the facts, Vaush owned Charlie Kirk. And early on, Charlie realized he's not dealing with some, random YouTuber that doesn't know what they're talking about. Charlie realized early he'd have to go into some really deep and slimy rhetorical tactics. Charlie seemed weak on the vaccine stuff. Vaush did good. Charlie was gish galloping so freaking hard. Holy crap, dude. He was trying to be smug and confident, but Vaush held his own. He didn't seem too crazy. Vaush did not seem too crazy. On the topic of vaccine mandates, Vaush was able to talk about it in a really normal way. Like, we should treat COVID vaccines like we treat vaccines for other diseases. That's how we should do it. He wasn't too crazy on mandates. Let's see. When it came to trusting pharmaceutical companies or not, or big tech companies, I wish Vaush would have said to Charlie Kirk, are you for taxing these companies more or something? What are Charlie Kirk's actual solutions for these problems? Because when it gets into really vague anecdote territory, it's hard for Vaush to operate. If you noticed, Charlie Kirk was talking about really broad philosophical topics, and, they were talking about their moral grounding, staying away from facts. When they moved into CRT, the discussion on CRT is going to be cultural. It's not going to be about CRT. You can pivot to like socioeconomic stuff if you want, but critical race theory was never going to be discussed, which I think is okay. Somebody said in chat that like Destiny was complaining nobody's going to talk about CRT in 6 months. That isn't true because nobody's talking about it now. The same conversations about race we have had for the past 10, 20 years, whatever, are the same conversations we're having about CRT. And the same conversations about race that we're having with the label CRT, these conversations are going to continue. So the rhetorical strategies that we use to fire back against these to fire back against these talking points. This all matters. The entire Republican Party is using fear mongering about critical race theory as a political tactic at this point. The historical conversation, Vaush couldn't go back and forth about historical, random historical facts that Charlie Kirk brought up. I wish in these moments that Vaush would have pivoted right back to facts. When Charlie Kirk brought up obscure facts about like America wasn't founded on racism, this number of states or whatever, this number of what were they called back then? Was it colonies at that point? This number made slavery illegal. At that point, Vaush should have sort of like surrendered it a little bit. I wish he would have went into more current day facts about like why are 30% of black people destined to start off in poverty versus 10% of white people. If you're born in America and you're black today, you're more likely to be poor than if you're white. But Vaush, when he did talk about socioeconomics, he did a good job not making it too racialized on the conversations about reparations. He spoke about overall class fixes to the issues instead of racialized ones, which played well off of Tim Pool, who moderated pretty well, I think. He spoke about like overall societal fixes on giving everybody a better opportunity, not just giving reparations to descendants of slaves, but also let's help poor white areas and stuff like that too. That worked well with the populist sensibilities of the two other men that were speaking. The big issue, though, is the conversation really derailed. And this is a big point about debates in general. If you are against a really skilled rhetorician, like Charlie Kirk, you're not gonna have a big slam dunk moment ever. It's gonna play out like a conversation. So they would have huge disagreements about vague, the vague topics Charlie Kirk led it to. They would agree to disagree. We're not gonna switch each other's positions on this. They wouldn't get to any specific facts on anything. They would talk about like moral frameworks, and then they would vaguely agree on sort of like populist undertones. Like multiple times when Vaush was talking about restructuring the system to work more for regular people, Charlie Kirk was like, "Yeah, I agree with a lot of that." Does Charlie Kirk agree with a lot of that? No, not at all. On the point of like education, I remember Charlie Kirk almost literally just said, "I am for the government banning any education that isn't patriotic." The literal 1776 fascist project. Ban everything bad about America. Don't let anybody know America's bad. Uh, Everybody bow down to our country. If America does anything wrong whatsoever, we can't talk about it. Don't question anything. If you need to do something for your country, you need to do it without questioning it. And Vosh sort of went over how that leads to authoritarianism. Mother Russia is a big thing brought up in the USSR. Like the homeland in Germany is what people fought for. Fight for this country. Don't think of anything else. Be yes men. That is a fascist authoritarian thing. It's an authoritarian mentality that Charlie Kirk wants. Talking about the moral purity of our country, shutting down everything gross that he doesn't see as fit in our country. Vosh tried pushing down on that, but I think he got a little bit too wordy in his descriptions and his prescriptions. He uses a lot of like I remember one example. I forget exactly what it was, but Vosh said like, "I'm not that much of a collectivist." Bro, instead of saying collectivist, like you don't have to say big words, okay? I know it might sound dumb, but people watching don't want to hear big words. If you want to pound a point home, you need to talk like the people watching. Don't use big words as much. I'm sorry. He got a little bit too wordy at points, which I thought was bad. But overall, his vibe was a good one. That whole drink a beer with energy is good. Vosh had that. You need to have that in order to reach people in any way. He's too flowery with his language. Yeah, he uses too many big words. He speaks like an academic. If you spoke like that to a working class guy in a bar, he'd probably slap you in the face. If you're going to be talking with all those big words, it might come off as sort of pretentious in certain scenarios. Although Vosh came off really chill, just the way he talks. I wish he could dumb it down a little bit, and it doesn't need to be dumb. It needs to be more simple and more surface level, so that it can penetrate more into people's minds. But I think he did a good job overall. It was really good. But like I said, dude, in these internet debates, when you're debating like Charlie Kirk, you're not gonna have a big slam dunk. Vosh got exposure. He responded good to the points that were brought up. But of course, it's a Tim Pool conversation. Anecdotes kept on being brought up. At one point, Tim Pool said to Vosh, "You can't use anecdotes. I know a guy." Like he literally said, "You can't use anecdotes," but then he used anecdotes right after that. At one point, Tim Pool said to Vosh, "People don't sell drugs out of desperation. They don't sell drugs out of desperation because there are quicker ways to make money than selling drugs." And Tim Pool's examples were selling socks and T-shirts that they bought and resold. I don't know what kind of T-shirts Tim Pool is selling or what kind of drugs he tried to sell. I don't know what world exists drugs in which drugs would make less money than reselling T-shirts that you bought in bulk. I guess from I don't even know. People get loans to sell drugs. What is Tim's audience working class? It's hard to say. Many people don't have really thought out ideologies, so they're gonna gravitate to whatever makes really, really easy sense to them. That's why I don't like using words like white privilege or big words that are academic or toxic masculinity or anything. People's vibes matter a lot. They might be attracted to your vibe more than they're attracted to your arguments. So if you come up and say like all white people have some inherent evil because of slavery and because of racism, you're not going to be able to get anyone on your side. You might radicalize them further to the other side. So knowing that people don't have real thought out ideologies, you need to learn what they do respond to. And we are going to look at this when I talk about the Nina Turner race. Many people think it's common sense what people will respond to. Many progressives online think they have the world figured out. What type of language are people going to respond to in a good way? But it's much more complicated than that. It's much more complicated. So there's a lot to go over with I can't talk now. I'm tired, but I sat here for 4 hours saying nothing. But Vaush did good. Good job, Vaush. He did the best of that anybody could do, really. If you really want to, like, unless if you literally have Barack Obama in there or some extremely skilled politician, Vaush, I don't think I would want anyone in there other than him to debate Charlie Kirk. Um, as aggressively as he did. I don't think like Destiny is made for that type of conversation because he doesn't care as much about the points he argues for. Vaush really cares about his worldview in these topics, so I think that comes off well in a conversation like this. I think his really methodical approach to rhetoric works in these conversations. But like I said, keep it less complicated. Try to focus on facts more so. Don't let them go really vague with it. But he did a lot of things good that I can't really complain about. I wouldn't have been able to do better. Vaush is a very talented public speaker. Whether you love him or hate him, he's very talented. You can't really deny that. And I try to be fair with everybody I talk about. I try to be really fair with the good and bad parts of like Destiny, Vaush, even like Hassan. Who else? Like Xander Hall. The good and bad parts, I like to go over all of them. I'm not really a fanboy of anybody in particular. I don't really care. I watch their content. I enjoy it. Destiny also said he couldn't do that, and Vaush is better in that position. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's not even a skill thing at that point. If you look at Destiny's other conversation with Tim Pool, he isn't motivated to prove an ideology correct. He doesn't have like a undertone to what he's saying as much. He does look for things that he seems unless if he's talking to an online lefty. But he just doesn't care as much about like liberalism or socialism or capitalism, which makes him good in other scenarios. But against Charlie Kirk, oh boy, you gotta really care about, you gotta be confident about what you're coming with. And you need to care enough to really defend your values at that point. It's not as much of a debate as it is a rhetorical battle to see which side can look better. It's a popularity contest. Who can speak better? Who can get the applause more? Who can come off cooler? Who can come off with a better vibe? And I think Vaush really cares about doing that, and he's great at doing that. Tim Pool's moderation, I would rate like I do 8 out of 10 for Tim Pool's moderation. It wasn't bad whatsoever. Yeah, they both seemed very moderated because they have to both look good. They know how to look good. If one person started yelling, they would seem unlikable to the people watching, and they know that. Neither of them wants to go out too far on ledge or whatever, and risk themselves falling off. So they stayed very within their own comfort zones. That's why Charlie Kirk was so quick to shut down certain conversations to start new ones. First off, he wanted the Gish Gallop, but also he's pivoting back to an area where he feels more comfortable. He doesn't want to talk to Vaush about the specific numbers of like income inequality between white and black people or like rich and poor people. He doesn't want to talk about what he actually wants to do. When Charlie Kirk talks about his prescriptions, it's hard for him to do that. But talking about like vague populist terms, that's easy. Let's talk about our moral systems. Let's talk about stuff that's hard to follow. You don't have to pin down exactly what I'm saying here. I can say whatever I want right now. The way it works in the real world, we don't really need to talk about specific policies. Why would we do that? Oh, you want to help people that are poor equally? Oh, I agree. We should give an opportunity for people to be successful. Wow. We agree on so much right now. That is so crazy. We are agreeing right now. We are talking like adults. Can you believe that? You are so much more reasonable than I thought you'd be. Like holy crap, wow. We are having a good conversation right here. I wanted this to be more of a conversation than a debate. Wow, dude. Yeah, exactly. The little guy matters. Oh, I disagree a little bit on this point, but I mostly agree. Oh, yeah, I'm very agreeable apparently. After all we've seen, by the way, of Charlie Kirk and Vaush separately. They come together and it results in this. Wow. But I mean, Charlie Kirk was sort of like this with Kyle Kalinske too. Laid back, like, oh man, we agree on so much. We agree on too much. That is Charlie Kirk's strategy. I'm telling you, I wish Vaush would have said, you hate these companies so much, want to tax them more? Or how do you want to hold them accountable? You think, like, dude, because you kind of reveal that Charlie Kirk isn't really a capitalist. He's something different. He's a different type of animal. We aren't having a Democrat and a Republican argue, or a liberal and a conservative argue. This debate was between a socialist and a fascist. That's what it was. Charlie Kirk doesn't agree with conservative principles of governing. He doesn't agree with conservative principles of democracy, or even the representative republic that we're in. He doesn't believe in that. He cares about patriotic education, American exceptionalism, the culture war. So I wish we would have got more of that. And we could have seen a conclusion more into that that little plot right there. But, playing it chill was smart for Vaush. Good job, man.